Dear Ambassador, Your Excellency, thank you for coming to SNTV, Somali National Television, and your time. SNTV is honored to interview you. Welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellency, when you come to Mogadishu, what was your thinking of Somalia, and now you have been working in Somalia? What is your assessment in overall?
Well, I came to Somalia in January 2016, but I actually spent a part of my childhood here in the early 1970s. So I remember Mogadishu from that period, 40 years ago. I also came here in 1992 and again in 1994. So I've seen Mogadishu at different stages. What's exciting for me about being here in Somalia is that the country is going down a political journey to try and sort out the basis upon which all Somalis can live together in peace. What kind of government they want, who is going to be responsible for what, whether it's the legal system, whether it's government, whether it's the army, whether it's police, whether it's education. So for me, it's a great privilege to be somewhere where there's a big conversation taking place among young people, among women, among the elite, among clan elders. What kind of country do we want? And that's exciting, because after so many decades of conflict, more conflict is being translated into politics and away from violence. So for me, it's a privilege to have the responsibility I do at this stage in Somalia's history.
Thank you, Ambassador. And in Galkayo, central Somalia, there has been a conflict between regional states of Puntland and Galmudug, a deadly fighting which caused a large displacement occurred there. Over 80,000 people displaced. There has been peace efforts by the federal government, international community, including your office, UNSAM, and locals there. So, what was the latest peace ceasefire and peace efforts in which your office had there?
Well, as you know, there has been an uneasy peace in Galkayo for over 20 years. After the agreement was signed in the early 90s, the conflict broke out in 2015. There was another agreement brokered by the Prime Minister with State President Guled of Galmudug, State President Gas of Puntland, and that fell apart. So it is a complicated story involving disputes around the use of local resources, around the border, but also around the status of Mudug and issues around the constitutional status of Galmudug. So it's very, very complicated. I think the latest is a recognition that there does need to be a process to discuss these problems, and that process must take place at different levels. It must take place both at the national level within Somalia, it must take place between the two states, but it must also take place between the communities in Galkayo, whether they are the business people, who have everything to lose, by the way, and nothing to gain from further conflict, between the elders of the two communities, maybe between civil society leaders between the two communities. And I think there is quite a lot of willingness to have these discussions, but there is too much distrust. And the thing is to build a degree of trust. And that trust will not be possible until a ceasefire holds. So what I did is go up to Galkayo twice at the request of the Prime Minister in the last 10 days to support his efforts to bring the two state presidents together, to get the parties on both sides to agree to a ceasefire and to say, if this ceasefire holds and if it is respected, then we create the space in which we can begin the discussions to understand the underlying problems and then address them. And as I say, some of those problems are to do with the border, some of them are to do with competition for water, they're to do with use of state property, they're to do with constitutional issues, so it's a complicated one. But my view is that only Somalis can resolve their own problems. The UN cannot do it, the international community cannot do it. We can help Somalis resolve their problems by providing some money, by providing technical support, by providing political encouragement, but ultimately it's about Somalis being willing to try and resolve these problems, and that's what we are hoping for.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now there is an election process in Somalia. Despite the delays of the implementation of the 2016 election process, are you confident that the remaining tasks are completed on time?
On time in Somalia means different things. The electoral process has already been delayed, but 6 months ago, many people were saying to me, I'm not sure this process will ever take place, or if it takes place, it's going to be 1 year late. So the good news is, it is happening. The upper house has more or less been elected. 43 out of the 54 seats have been filled. As of today, about 40% of the seats of the lower house, roughly 120, have been elected. And there is a sense of excitement around the country to see real competition, to see people voting, to see women so politically active, and to see that it's happening. So I believe that we will complete this process for the lower house maybe in the next 10 days, I hope, at the outside, and that we can then move to the stage of the MPs from the upper house and the lower house coming together to elect the speaker and then the president. So yes, I'm confident it will happen.
Now 9 days remain for the deadline of the presidential election. It was November 30. So your expectation that everything will go ahead and happen as well as it was intended on November 30?
Well, the deadline keeps changing. Actually, the deadline was August, and then it was, October, and then September, and then it became November. And as I say, deadlines in Somalia are not the same as deadlines in Switzerland. There's a difference, But, so I think, I can only repeat, I think it will happen. There has to be a bit more slippage because the lower house elections have not been completed. I think we will see a quorum, that is 194 seats, probably within 5 days. And in theory, you can move ahead with the election of the speaker, of the two speakers at that point. But of course, we want as many lower house seats to be finished before everybody comes to Mogadishu to elect the speaker.
Now 150 lower house members are elected. This is the latest report.
Is it 150? Okay.
150.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And even though there are federal and regional levels independent election committees, yet we see a very push from the international partners under your leadership. And this raises question whether the election committees are independent. How can you convince those criticize your office of interference as they see statements such as on members with a history of violence, women caught, and so on?
Well, whatever we do, we're criticized. If we don't do anything, I get bombarded. Why aren't you doing more? Somalia needs a referee. International community should be telling everybody what to do. So if we get involved, everyone says, why are you interfering? Why don't you stay away? So whatever we do, we get criticized. So I just want to make a few points. Number one, this electoral model, we did not design it, the international community or the UN. This is a completely Somali model. It's unique. You think we have the imagination to design this model? This model comes from 1.5 years of political negotiation among Somalis. Every detail, the number of delegates, the number of seats, the rules of the game. Our job has been, first of all, to try and encourage everybody to stick to the schedule. Secondly, to introduce our experience from other electoral processes around the world, including the need for a code of conduct, the need for electoral bodies, the need for training, the need for a secret ballot, all these kind of things. So what we've been trying to do is support the process, but the idea that it's our process or that we designed it is frankly ridiculous. I mean, every time a new deal is struck on how it's going to be conducted, we go back to the office and say, wow, that's interesting, but it's not our model. So you make the point about the federal indirect election implementation team and its state equivalents, and of course there's also a dispute resolution body, there's also observers, there's all sorts of other bodies. You cannot conduct an electoral process unless you have institutions that can support it. And in many countries that have not been through civil war, these institutions exist. You have a voter registry, you have a court system, you have an independent electoral body that has real capacity with offices around the country. None of these things exist in Somalia. So what you, Somalis, have done in 4 months is create a mechanism that most countries take 4 years, sometimes 40 years. So you can be very critical, as we are, of all the things that can go wrong because they're easy to spot, but actually don't forget the amazing achievement in bringing these bodies together and in conducting the process in the first place.
Okay, thank you. At the point of international partners promote democratic process and the will of people of Somalia. On the other point, you forcefully try to stop some individuals becoming senators of MPs, while you are aware of that everyone is not guilty until proven guilty by a court. Some people argue that this is a time Somalia needs to move on and to reconcile instead of looking back of bad history. What is your view on this?
Again, because the judicial system is fairly lacks capacity, it is difficult to prove that individuals have histories of criminality or of violence unless they are on international lists. Otherwise, it's up to the Somalis, in the absence of a strong criminal system, to decide. You, personally, do you think people who have committed massacres should be allowed to stand as an MP? That's my question to you.
Many believe.
Do you believe that?
Many people believe that warlords or in the past have been disarmed or are out of the politics at the moment.
Yeah.
Since Somalia is in process of dialogue, peace talks, or in reconciliation, people say it was better to remove the earlier bad history and open a new page for being a member of parliament or upper house. So to forget the wrong is just revenge. People say this.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is ultimately not an international decision. This is, as I say, in the absence of legal clarity about this, this is a conversation that Somalis must have with themselves. If Somalis think somebody who in the past has committed atrocities, as long as they now have changed their attitude, they should be admitted into politics, so be it. If they say, no, too much blood, too much violence, this is unacceptable, so be it. But this is a decision that Somalis have to take, because, as I say, the criminal system does not decide these things. So it's left to the Somali public to figure these things out. But, from an international perspective, generally, the idea of having people with histories of violence, criminality, in positions of authority is not one that is deemed to be desirable. But if, for purposes of reconciliation, all Somalis feel that this is acceptable in certain circumstances, then that is, of course, to be respected.
Okay, Ambassador, and we are coming closer to the end. And there is a peace talk between Somaliland and Somalia, and the search of unity again. So, what is your role to this, and what is your view towards uniting Somalis and the issue of Somaliland and Somalia?
Well, you know, I think unless and until both the government of Somaliland and the government of Somalia want to have these talks, it is very difficult for outsiders, including the United Nations, to help them. If both sides want to have these talks because they see that it is in their common interest, maybe initially to talk about things they have in common, like the environment, like the drought, like overhead flights. There are so many issues that Somalilanders and the rest of Somalia have in common. So I think there's a very big agenda. There are other actors at the moment helping to try and bring the two sides together around talks, but at the moment the UN has not been asked to play this role, and we can only do it if everybody wants us to, and there's a real wish on both sides to make it happen.
Okay, Ambassador, you have been in Somalia for a lot of time and different years. Do you know Somali? Can you speak Somali language?
You know, I'm ashamed to say that my Somali is terrible. It really is very, very bad.
You can say good morning.
I can say a few things. Yes. Hambalyo is one of the most important things to be able to say, and I would like to say that about, despite the problems with the electoral process, including, by the way, corruption and harassment and intimidation and all the things that are happening, I still think Hambalyo. It's fantastic that this process is happening.
Okay, finally, what is your message? What is the message you would like to convey to Somali people who will watch you from Somali national television?
My message is that a new group of people will be in the parliament. Find out from them what they're going to do for you, because that's what parliamentarians and governments are about, is serving the people. So whenever I meet a newly elected MP, I say, okay, you're in the parliament. What's your plan? What are you going to do for the people, whether it's in your clan or your region? And I have a funny feeling a lot of them have been so preoccupied by the complication of getting elected that they're not thinking in terms of what their agenda is for Somalia. And until we have politicians and government officials thinking about how to make Somalia more functional, then the problem of dealing with problems like drought, of lack of education, lack of security, will never be resolved. We have to have a situation in which, as in any country, those who are elected to positions of authority are then held accountable for delivering benefits to their own constituencies, but also to the whole country. So I'm hoping this electoral process, even though it is not perfect, will result in a new group of politicians, some old ones, some new ones, but a new determination to try and help Somalis resolve their many, many problems.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Michael Keating, UN Special Envoy for Somalia, giving us this inclusive interview with Somali National Television. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.